Oh my gosh, we're live.
This is not Phoenix.
We're not in Phoenix, are we?
No, we're not in Phoenix.
You know how I know we're not in Phoenix?
Because we have Boucher.
No, there's a fireplace.
There's a fireplace. That's right. Yeah, we don't need Phoenix fireplaces in June. That's for dang sure.
Well, first and foremost, we want to say welcome, everyone. This is our first and hopefully more to follow virtual summits that we're going to be doing for the Digital Marketers Organization. We're excited to have you guys with us. We decided that we would take a plane flight over to Napa Valley to actually be at the Boucher Vineyard and do the event live from here. Mostly, I think it was because we wanted a drink, and they do have some crisp whites, as we love to drink in the morning for whatever reason. Cheers to you. And cheers to all of you as well. We hope all of you will stay for the entire event today. Including the wine tasting. Even if you weren't part of our VIP club, you're more than welcome to kind of indulge yourself and find out more about Boucher, the wine that they serve here, and potentially join the VIP club for our other events. So without that, I'd like to introduce myself again, Jim Christian, one of the co-founders of DMO. And then also we have Joe, who was another co-founder of the DMO. And way off in the corner over there is TJ. And he's also handsome and a co-founder of the DMO. So welcome, everyone. We have a little bit over 400 people that have joined us today. We're looking to start off right now with Cindy Krum from Mobile Moxie. So Cindy, I think you're up and about with your Wi-Fi. Maybe.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Hey, Cindy, how's it going? I need to scoot over.
Good. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you too. Thank you for joining us today.
Volume down.
We're super excited to see you.
Yeah.
And we're going to turn the volume off.
Yeah. So, yeah, she sounds great. I am very thankful that with all the fun little technical stuff we've been jumbling around, it's going to work. It's actually going to work.
It's been a rough morning. Rough morning. So thank you. Cindy, take it away, please. We're all ears.
Okay. Good morning. I'll share my presentation. Let's see if this is going to work. Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Cindy Krum and I'm the CEO of Mobile Moxie. Based in Denver, Colorado, we do mobile SEO and ASO consulting, and I've been doing this for a very, very long time. Since before 2005. 2005 is when I started speaking about it. But what I want to talk to you about is looking at a paradigm of the future for SEO. And, a lot of SEOs have made their bones by kind of chasing the algorithm or looking at all the algorithm updates and like digging deep into the data. But that is not how I've gone about things, because for a long time we had clients that were so big and just not very nimble that they told us outright that we couldn't guarantee that any of our recommendations would be acted on and live within 6 months. That would be maybe a best case scenario, but it was more likely that the stuff that we recommend had to go live a year later, potentially up to a year later. And so we had to get good at seeing the forest for the trees, knowing the difference between minor fluctuations and major changes, and also anticipating what things were going to look like a year down the road or more when the changes that we recommended actually went live. And this is a different way of looking at SEO. And what I can tell you is that some of the things that I've said historically have not been popular. And I'm going to talk you through a couple examples of that where I've predicted things and the SEO community at large told me I was wrong, or at least specific people in the community. And these people are super smart SEOs that I respect and think are great. And this is just to say that if you have your own perspective or your own opinion, that's okay. And so let's go through some stories. So I started way back. This is a story from 2012. And the point of the story that I wrote was about how Google seemed to be preferring websites in the mobile algorithm. They seemed to prefer websites that ranked well in, or that worked well on less sophisticated phones, feature phones, WAP phones, stuff like that. The feedback that I got from this article after it went live from the editor of the website at the time was that nobody cares. Nobody cares about anything but smartphones, and I need to stop writing about this. The problem is that, 4 years later, starting in 2016, is when Google started talking about the next billion users and how much they care about it. And they said that we do prefer content that ranks well and works well on less sophisticated phones. And they still do. Another story in 2014 was the first time I spoke at MozCon, and my talk was about how mobile SEO and desktop SEO was different. And with that, it was kind of something that people hadn't said, that you needed to think about them differently. And in fact, that same week, someone else who I respect very much, Will Critchlow, published an article on the Moz blog saying why you shouldn't have a mobile strategy. And in fact, Rand Fishkin had already published an article that said that there was no such thing as mobile SEO. And so, this is tough because that's what I did. And these people were saying, no, they're not different. Focus on desktop and mobile will come. Mobile will work itself out. Don't worry about it. And so now what we know is that this Think with Google blog has different sections for every region in the world, and every single one has a mobile specific section because they believe that you should be looking at mobile and treating mobile slightly differently. And this is direct from Google again. So I think, mobile is different. There are things that you have to look at a little bit differently with mobile. Another one, this is a slide from 2018. Sorry, it's a bit ugly, but what I was talking about was entity first indexing. And this is how I conceived of mobile first indexing, that things would be organized around an idea and you would get cross-domain, cross-channel, topical organization that included shopping and app information and websites, but also video and audio and maps. And now, and that wasn't very popular. No one liked, or, some people didn't like me renaming mobile first indexing to entity first indexing. But now, if you look at a search result, we have things like this, which is a search result for a book. And at the top, you have knowledge graph, and then you have apps that include audio. You have a library reserve, which pulls information from the cloud to see if the book is in stock. You have related nodes on the knowledge graph, interesting finds, a whole video section, and shopping at the end. And sometimes that shopping ad shows up as a carousel at the top as well, above the knowledge graph. So I do feel like this is panning out. Another story is me talking about PWAs. I was, I think, the first SEO to talk about how Google really did care about these things called progressive web apps. And they had organized an entire conference around them, but they were kind of sometimes hard to SEO, but they seemed very important. And when I did this, the second time I talked about it at a conference ever, someone stood up and told me that because Apple hadn't signed on to support PWAs, nobody cared. And, less than a year later, his platform was incorporating PWA and promoting PWA and spending a lot of time on PWA. And these people, they've all apologized. It's all, fine now. But it's just to say that it's okay to have a different opinion and to say what you see and what you see happening because, not everyone knows. We're all doing our best to figure things out. This is another example from a slide where I thought that it was kind of interesting that Google was creating dynamic links for stuff, including Google My Business, Knowledge Graph, and Images. This is from 2017. And what you can see by the blue arrows along the bottom is that Google is giving short links to these things. And that seemed interesting because, you have to wonder why would Google do that? Why is that valuable? Is it just valuable for the user, or does Google see a value for itself there as well? And I also talked about Fraggles soon after in 2018, which is something that it's when Google lifts a fragment of information and links to it with a jump link. So you're indexing information that is deeper than just a page. It's more nuanced than a page, and that's a Fraggle. And now, of course, for both of these things, Google has launched what they call scroll to text fragments. That's what they're calling Fraggles. And part of it is with these jump links that they just create and can link to specific things, even if the link wasn't there in the first place. They can link to highlighted bits of text on a website and create that, and I could text it to you as a newly created link that wasn't there before. So these are stories of when I said things and predicted things that ended up panning out. Now, not everything I've said has panned out. I would say most things have, but it's fine for smart people to disagree. And I'm not saying that I'm smarter than anyone. I'm just saying that I take a different perspective on these things, and that it's okay if you do too. And I want to encourage you to think like that, and not get sucked in to the details of SEO and lose the forest for the trees. It's good to know the details in the data, but it's also good to be able to see the bigger picture. And that gets us to a concept, is that when you're just doing SEO in the moment, you're kind of always playing catch up. And so doing SEO for the long term and looking towards the future and making assumptions about what's going to happen in the future can make your SEO strategy a bit more sustainable. So you're a bit more efficient and you're not always playing catch up. And that's why I like it. So I know what you're wondering. That's a lot of history. Where's the next big change? What's the next big prediction? And so what I'm going to do with the rest of the talk is walk you through how I think about these changes and how I think about SEO as a whole, and kind of get you through the thought process to the end of what I'm seeing and what I am predicting. And we'll start with this. We'll go back to this slide, which I've already shown, which was a mobile search result for a book, and all of the different pieces of this entity, this book, and how they come together and cluster in a search result. Now, this is what it looks like, plus my red boxes and notes. But when we cover up the red boxes, these are things that are put in by Google. And actually, bottom left, that should probably be covered up too, because that's the beginning of the next big red box. There's a little bit of overlap in there. But so imagine the whole left column being red, at least a third or a quarter of that next column red, with one Amazon result, and then more red, and then Goodreads. And then it's not until the third scroll that you get another book that's not from Amazon or Goodreads, which is, they're kind of huge sites. And then you get to a video pack, and then you get to Wikipedia. And so my point here is to say that Google is taking up a lot of space in the search results that they weren't before. And what's a bit more, nefarious about this kind of thing is that they're not reporting on all of this space that they're taking. And some tools are reporting on most of it. I would say not all of it, but most of it. But they're really not giving this space, all of this red space, enough weight in communicating how valuable any kind of ranking might be. Because if you were just to look at something like Google Search Console and evaluate your rankings, what you would get is something like this. So you notice that Amazon ranking position 1 is still on the second scroll, position 2, bottom of second scroll, and position 4, top of third scroll. So just because your ranking and a number doesn't actually tell you too much about what's happening in the search result if you have a knowledge graph, and especially if you have a knowledge graph that's particularly long, because remember, knowledge graphs are super variable in how big they are, how much space they take up. And so the other thing to know is that Google's content is much more interesting than the blue links that they're ranking. When you see knowledge graph and the author information and more by this author and stuff like that, all of these images and videos that are now embedded in Google stuff, but less often embedded in blue link kinds of results, you realize that Google stuff Google's content is potentially intentionally more interesting than the blue links. Google's doing a better job of showing their content and getting the traffic than what they're allowing websites to do in some cases. You know, we did see some blue links with images in there, and that's good. And you can get videos in there, but the best way to get a video is through YouTube. So that's still a Google property. So it's a bit, I don't know, sneaky, maybe worse than that, maybe evil. But it does feel limiting if you're competing with blue links against all that rich content. And so that creates this situation where maintaining position 1 absolutely does not mean maintaining visibility. And looking at this Search Console result, you might notice that the average position, the purple line, improved quite a bit at the same time that average clicks fell off the map. And so you might wonder, well, why? Why is that? Why would that happen? And potentially it's because this query got reclassified and Google started adding in all of those different kinds of assets into the result, right? That could absolutely be a good reason why something like this would happen, why you would see such weird data. But the other thing to know is that, and look how new this article is, June 10th, a couple days ago, it's not just small websites. Even Wikipedia has lost 3 billion organic search visits to Google in 2019. And Wikipedia was like one of our biggest nemesis, right? They were taking all of our rankings. Well, now Google is taking all of theirs. And what we see here, if you read the article, is that it's been attributed to Google's zero-click results. What's kind of unfair about this is a lot of the zero-click results include knowledge graph where Google is lifting information from Wikipedia. So their generosity of allowing Google to lift their information into Wikipedia has caused people not to get to the Wikipedia site where, you know, Wikipedia encourages donations and stuff like that. So I'm not the only SEO to say this, and this isn't new. You've probably heard it before. Rand Fishkin has been making, talking about this a lot and making some very good points, and especially in this where he breaks out mobile and desktop results. What you see here is that mobile is different than desktop, especially in terms of zero-click results, because 61.5% of mobile searches are a zero-click result, whereas only 34.4% of desktop searches are a zero-click result. And that's, you know, likely because mobile is formatted different and because mobile is, in fact, different than desktop. Dr. Pete has written about this. How low can position 1 go? The 2020 edition. Great stuff here. Mike King also wrote about it. Time to reconsider rank tracking, saying that like rankings don't mean anything if position 1 is halfway down the SERP, or if we can't reliably know how high or low position 1 might be. So how can we get a better perspective on this thing? What can we do to plan for the future of SEO with all of this stuff in mind? And I feel like in this case, not in every case, but in this case, a good answer comes from something unexpected. So I want you to relax and take a deep restorative breath in and out, because you might not like the answer. The answer is, I think that at least to some degree, we need to start SEOing like amateurs, at least a little bit. And I'm going to explain what I mean, but the best explanation for this strategy comes from the book Range. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Range by David Epstein is about the different kinds of benefits that you get from experts versus generalists. And he says that experts are great, but some generalists can be great too. And generalists who know a lot about, who have breadth instead of depth, sometimes pull in more of a nuanced view of something that an expert thinks they know everything about. But because they're so stuck in their own expert data, they're not seeing the bigger picture. And The story is full of really great examples of this happening, and I've picked one to talk about. I'm going to warn you, it's a bit depressing, but I think it's the best way to illustrate the concept, and that is with firefighters, specifically forest firefighters, who are seriously trained and experts at putting out fires, and they have the instincts and the reflexes, and they are great at this, and this is what they live for. And he says what can happen is that these experts get into a situation where they're fighting a fire, they're doing their thing, and they get a radio message from maybe the fire chief that says something like, it's time to get out, you've got to get out. But the experts resist because they're doing their thing. They're doing what they love, and they think things look okay. The problem is the fire chief can see the bigger picture. He's not in the midst of this experience. He's a bit further out, or she's a bit further out, and potentially can see something very dangerous, like a fire that's about to flash over or something like that. And David Epstein explains that in situations like this, where they're told to get out right now, some firefighters rely on their instincts to keep fighting, or at least their instincts to hold on to their tools and not just run as fast as they can, because they want to have their tools in case they can fight the fire again. And their instincts are not to run, they're to fight. And the problem is that in some cases, this can be lethal. And I bring this up because I don't want the same situation to happen to you in SEO. I want you guys to be able to see the big picture at the same time and not get so stuck in your data that you miss a larger picture. I'm sorry for the depressing story, but I think it's really illustrative. And the book is great. It has lots more uplifting stories as well. But that one, especially the reliance on the tools and the being so enmeshed with what exactly is going on right now that you miss the larger picture, it is a really good illustration of what I feel is going on right now. So let's look back at the book. Like I said, more uplifting stories in there. But let's look at the search result for the book. When we do a search result, mobile or desktop, we get this knowledge graph. It's got pictures. It's got information aggregated from all over the web. It's got a description. It's got links to the author. And above this, of course, sometimes is even places where you can buy it in paid. So there's a lot going on there that's really intriguing and might give you exactly the information that you want. You might not have to go any further. And when you look at the desktop result, this is what it looks like. And so here again, in a normal, in the old days of SEO, even with PPC, you might have at least 1 or 2 organic results showing, but now we have none. And of course, you've already seen the static images, but we can know that it's even worse in mobile because everything is stacked. And so we have to get a couple scrolls down just to get to a blue link at all. And then Google puts more stuff in between to space out those blue links. And the point here is that there are a lot of things that might not show up in your tools, especially if you're relying too heavily on GMB. Some of the other tools like SEMrush and Ahrefs have done a better job, Rank Ranger have done a better job of reporting on these things, but things like site links, image thumbnails, map thumbnails, image carousels, answer vertical expanders, AMP, app packs, map packs, image packs, video packs, knowledge graph, featured snippet, people also ask, people also search for, related searches, interesting finds, podcasts, PPC, popular products, product knowledge graph, and jump links and Fraggles. These things are especially not reported on in GMB, and yet they take up so much room and they're much more interesting often than just a blue link. And so that's a concern. So let's talk about what some of the SEOs are missing by paying attention to only what's in their data. Now, the first thing is ads. And I know that this is blasphemy for a lot of you people. But back in the way early days of SEO, a lot of SEOs were also PPCs. They did both. And what I want you to avoid when you're doing SEO like an amateur is I want you to avoid thinking things like, well, I'm an SEO and this is outside of the scope of my job. Now, I'm not saying that we all need to learn about PPC or at least I'm not saying that we need to do PPC, but we maybe should learn about it and pay attention to it. And the reason is because the click-through rate on PPC has been increasing for a long time. And again, it's been increasing more on mobile than desktop. Now, if we're all doing mobile-first indexing, mobile-friendly design, we care about mobile, we know that more than half the searches are mobile, why are we not more concerned about this, you know, between 9.8 and 8.7% of click-through going to a PPC result? Why are we not counting it or at least looking to see if there's a PPC result? Because 8.7% might not seem like a lot to you, but it is a lot if you're in position 1 and it's coming straight out of your pocket. So the thing to know here is that PPC has changed, and anymore, PPC has a lot more to do with Google Shopping. And in fact, 65% of all Google clicks, all Google Shopping clicks come from Google Ads, or Google Shopping, excuse me. The 65% come from Google Shopping, and 89% of the non-branded Google searches of ad clicks for retailers are also Google Shopping. So when we talk about Google Shopping, this is the PLAs, the product carousels. And what can be kind of misleading about this is, in general, PPC people will report a lower click-through on PLAs as compared to traditional PPC ads. But the thing you've got to see through there is there are more PLAs displayed in any one result, and it's a carousel that you can scroll. So those clicks are getting divided among more potential ads, which of course Google likes, and advertisers, they see it as a lower click-through, but it's a lower click-through per ad, but as a whole, I would say the clicks seem to be going up because they're so engaging, and they often give a user or a searcher exactly what they need. So you should be looking at your search results to see, is this query that you're targeting in SEO returning PLAs? And how do we think that that's affecting the potential for us to get a click out of any particular query? But the other thing to know here is that Google's launched non-paid PLAs, free PLAs. And this could be a game changer. This to me seems like a really big deal because they're so interesting. And so in this example, we show a query for binoculars. We get best binoculars featured snippet up there. And we're going to get, if we scroll down, a cluster of popular products. So there are different ways to show product knowledge graph, but this popular products insert, when you click it, it clicks over to something that looks like this, which is a product knowledge graph. And it's not binoculars in general, it's one particular kind of binoculars, and you see the aggregated reviews, the stores you can buy it at. And in some cases they say, do you want to buy it online or offline? They give you a lot of different information. And even at the top, they have disambiguation where you can say, do you want, version 1.0 or 2.0, stuff like that. This seems incredibly compelling, but my concern is that some SEOs might think that this is not part of their job because it goes through the Merchant Center. But the truth is, there's a big risk. This is John Henshaw. He's been pretty vocal about this concern that there seems to be a potential blurring of the lines between organic and paid. And especially recently, this week or last week, Google announced that the former head of Google Ads is changing roles to be the head of search as well, while also overseeing ads. And so you've got to know that we're going in a direction where potentially it's harder to know the difference between an ad and an organic result. And that product knowledge graph is the perfect example of this, where you're going through an ad platform to do something that is free, that is organic. And remember that there's really only one or two ways to get into Google Organic. There's crawling and indexing that way, and then there's submitting through the API. But there's a lot of ways to get into Google Ads. Google really tries to cater to ads because remember, that's floating their boat. That's what makes everyone's salary there. So they want to make ads really easy. But what if they use the ad technology to make SEO easy or easier or something like that? And the other thing to know, and this blog post from Store Grower about PLAs and free PLAs is really good. But the other thing to know here is that the PPCs who are setting up these free PLAs, they're basically doing SEO. They do tests about which title performs the best, which description performs the best. And my guess is that it's not just which performs best in click rate, but it's optimizing things for other aspects of it as well, because part of what you're sending in Merchant Center is not just the title and the description, but also basically schema markup or the highlights of different products as you would call them out in schema. So I think if you're doing SEO like an amateur, you want to be in Product Knowledge Graph because it ranks. And even if you're not getting the traffic to your site, it ranks really well. And it's not that hard to do. You set up Merchant Center. Ideally, you can set it up before your competitors do it, and then you're the only store there, or you're one of the few. Include optimized product titles and descriptions and good schema or good notes about all the products that you're putting in. Track the product rankings in Merchant Center, or Mobile Moxie has a tool that lets you track it. And then watch your product knowledge graph kind of float to the top in SERPs, because what we know is that when Google creates something cool and new, it seems to magically float to the top of the SERPs. So I think we're going to see more and more product knowledge graph over time. So we've talked about product knowledge graph, but what about just regular knowledge graph? Know that regular knowledge graph is being built out, and more things are getting knowledge graph. So that was a search for poison oak. When we scroll down, we do get this kind of entity-rich feeling of a search result, but then we get related searches at the bottom. And when we expand those, what we're getting is featured snippets about specific featured snippets about poison oak in Texas, poison oak leaves, poison oak vines. These feel like sub-nodes on the knowledge graph. But when we click through, we can also get more information about Pacific poison oak. And then it gives us the cluster of people also search for, which gets us to more knowledge graph, more search results where the knowledge graph is the primary feature at the top. And anything that might happen in a blue link is kind of relegated to the bottom. It's not as important as the knowledge graph. So one knowledge graph is linking to nodes that seem featured snippets that seem like nodes in the knowledge graph, and it's linking to other knowledge graphs that already exist. And this is happening at the top of the result for the knowledge graph and the bottom for the related searches, and people also search for kinds of results. So let's talk about that. Why would Google create links from one knowledge graph to another? Why would Google do that? Well, here's an example of one of those links. Do we know where it goes? No one knows. It's an encoded or obscured URL in g.co. But when we click it, it goes here to the range book, a knowledge graph for a specific book. And it has a share link. That's how you get the links to the knowledge graph, is in this share link. It's the g.co URL right there. And remember that this is where Google is showcasing what it's been investing in, like this borrow from a library cloud service that knows the inventory of all the libraries in the country. Google wants to highlight the stuff that it's been investing in. And so it's slotting all of that stuff into the knowledge graph. And I think more and more, we're going to see more cloud services as part of the knowledge graph. And remember, this was something that I pointed out 3 years ago in 2017 with these share links. These seemed important then, and they are important now. What's good to know is that you can track these as a URL and watch them change over time. And I'll show you that in a minute. But remember also that we talked about entity first indexing. This was a 2018 slide, and I talked about how important this idea is, and especially how the knowledge graph can be a concern for SEOs because there's only one thing that can rank in the knowledge graph. There's knowledge graph rankings are almost like a canonical answer where you're either there or you're not. And yes, there's sometimes disambiguation. I remember an early kind of disambiguation example I would give is a query for bread would be disambiguated. Did you mean bread the food or bread the band? And that's an important query if you're bread the band and you're promoting a show. And so I do think that it's important that we look at who's winning the knowledge graph and why, and think about, as SEOs, how do we impact that? And there are some answers, but there's not a winning answer. And if you wonder why I say this, we can just ask John Mueller, or maybe ask Judith Lewis, or potentially Mike King knows, maybe Sam Noble, or Danny Sullivan. The sad thing about these one winner knowledge graphs is it can be hard to compete. Even some of the best, most respected SEOs in the world have not managed to claim or to get a knowledge graph, or even in these cases, I think, to get a disambiguation on their name. And if you're a brand, this has implications too, because I know as Mobile Moxie that there are a lot of companies that have Mobile and Moxie in their name. And you can play that out in many different ways. So it's not just people's names, it's brand names, it's product names. We want to, as SEOs, if we can't be number one with a blue link and we're going to be pushed down by a knowledge graph, then we should be that knowledge graph. And so I think SEOs, sometimes they say, well, I just optimize websites. I don't deal with that knowledge graph stuff. You can't really influence it. That's not true. You can. And if you're SEOing like an amateur, you look at a SERP and you're like, hey, what's this thing? I want to be there. And you should want to be there. And that's, playing out like what I think SEOing like an amateur means, is to really look at the search results and say, I want to be here and here and here. And what do we have to do to make that happen? So SEO for knowledge graph is tough. Number one, you have to have a unique name and be awesome, but sometimes that's even not enough. So the next thing to do to be in the knowledge graph is to be multifaceted. And what I mean by that is to have videos, have podcasts, have images, have websites that are all kind of clustered around you as an entity, or your brand as an entity. Now, we haven't done loads of testing on this, but my guess is that you can also shortcut it by getting into the Merchant Center with a product knowledge graph. So even if you don't have a product, maybe you need to make a product that has a lot of the markup that would at least create a product entity that then you can stem off of and create nodes off of. Similarly, getting into Google Play. Most people forget that Google Play has books, movies, TV shows, apps, music videos. They have all this different kind of stuff that is naturally organized in a knowledge graph's hub and node kind of situation. So maybe you need to find something that you can get into Google Play, because I think that they're probably using Google Play as a core for understanding what is related to what, who is the musician in this band, because they have that information in there. Actually, if you look up a band, you're not just going to get the band, you'll know who is in the band, what songs does the band play, stuff like that. It is very much like a knowledge graph, and I would guess that they're using it to inform the larger knowledge graph. Also, of course, the standard recommendation to use schema to associate yourself or your brand with things that are already in the knowledge graph, and to get featured snippets, because like I said, those featured snippets that we saw on the Poison Oak example, they seem to feed in to the larger knowledge graph that they were ranking for. So potentially it's a two-way street. Maybe you don't start with knowledge graph, maybe you start with featured snippets. Now, something else that SEOs have been missing is just the idea of these extra site links and Fraggles. So extra site links have started to show up not just if you rank number one, but all throughout the search result. And Fraggles, like I mentioned before, they're showing up more and more too. The problem is that Fraggles can be hard to spot because they often look like site links. In many cases, you can't tell. So in this example, we have some Q&A schema that's lifting a fragment in two different formats there and a third format here. And in some of these cases, when you click the link, you get to a separate page. That's a site link. In other cases, when you click through, you get to not a separate page, but a location on a page. It's really common with forums like that because there are so many different answers to one question. And if you click on an answer, you want to get directly to that answer so you can read more about that answer rather than just getting to the top of the page. And this seems to me like something that users would really like. If they start to read something in a search result and it's so compelling that they want to click through, then they don't want to have to search to find it. So I do think that that's particularly helpful. So remember, just think of the word Fraggle. It means fragment plus handle. It's those two things. It's a lifted bit of text, even if it's just like a title, and then a handle or a jump link. And the important thing here is that the jump link doesn't have to be put into the website by the webmaster. Google can use those dynamic short links to link anything on a page. Now, more about that in a minute. Let's talk about how I spotted this. Number one, I did see lots of jump links getting into the search result. Sometimes they were labeled as jump links, sometimes not. But then I started seeing this AMP highlighting feature where if you had AMP content and people clicked through to that page, Google would scroll immediately to it and highlight it. Now, there's a lot of controversy about this because Google has started doing it on non-AMP content now, and not everyone likes that. But I do think that there's something we can learn about how they're doing it and what they're highlighting. Because if you look at this example on the right, you can see that the highlighting skips some stuff. And it highlights here, and then it skips, and then it highlights again. That is fascinating because it gives us a sneak peek into the depth of language understanding that Google thinks it's achieved, because it's saying, we think this is part of the answer, and we're going to add an ellipsis, and we think this is also part of the answer, but this stuff in the middle is not. It's fluff, or it's at least just not answering the question. That's a really sophisticated linguistic understanding, and I think in that, maybe SEOs aren't giving Google enough credit, right? That is sophisticated. And of course, remember, this was just announced that they're doing this, and they're doing it now, not just for AMP pages. So that was a prediction. People didn't understand it. They said those are just jump links. Fraggles aren't a big deal. No, Fraggles are a big deal because Google, it shows that Google can index not just pages, but pieces of pages, and potentially organize those in their knowledge graph differently. If, let's say, I usually give this example, if we have a long page about vegetables, and Google historically would struggle with this long page about all these different vegetables, but with Fraggles, Google can say this piece is about tomatoes, we understand this over here with all the other tomatoes, and this piece is about lettuce, and we understand this with all the other information over there about lettuce. We used to struggle a lot with having to break up pages into thinner, lighter pages just to appease Google. But potentially this is Google's solution to that. And it may also be Google's solution to indexing things that are a bit more complex, like single page apps that have only one URL and are driven by JavaScript, or native apps, which work a lot like single page apps. They have deep, deep content, but not a lot of URLs. So if Google can overlay jump links to get to a specific piece of a native app or a specific piece of a single page app, then Google solved a problem that people actually really did have. SEOs didn't think it was a problem because they wanted to do their SEO thing. They wanted to put out the fire, but they didn't see the larger issue, which is that the world is going towards JavaScript, right? So maybe Fraggles are just links to featured snippets. What if that's the case? Because that's actually, Google's been lifting featured snippets for a long time. What if the featured snippets have existed, but the ability to link to them hasn't? And now what Google's gotten really good at is finding featured snippets, but also linking to them. The innovation was the linking to the featured snippets. So Fraggles maybe aren't as radical or new as you might think in the beginning. They're just the next step of a featured snippet. And this is one more example to show you how it's easy to confuse these things. So we do a search for what's in a treehouse kit. Notice that the two results are different. We're on two different phones, but from the same location. And people also ask, it shows up higher in the one on the left than the one on the right. It's there in both, but that's interesting. And then we get to the bottom, we see this greenhousevibrant.com doesn't have anything going on the right side, but it does on the left. Now, what are those? What's a treehouse? Treehouse building instructions. Well, or ideas. When you click through for treehouse building ideas, you get to the middle of a page. It's just a subheading in a long page. So that's a Fraggle. But we scroll up to this one and we click on 4-Tree Treehouse Kit. Now, it's a horrible website. It's very ugly. But what you can see is that it's a separate page for to build a treehouse among 4 trees instead of 1. It's not a section on a page. But those two things, the Fraggle and the site link, they looked the same. So the point here is to say that just because you see something and you think you know what it is doesn't mean you shouldn't actually investigate. Because if you're trying to back engineer what's going on and what's causing this stuff to rank or what's causing us to get site links here and not there, sometimes, but not always, then knowing whether it's linking to a piece of a page or a separate page might be useful for your investigation. And this is especially true if you're looking at competition. You might think you're looking at a site link, but until you click and see what's really going on, you won't actually know. And then you won't know how to optimize for it. So here's the new thinking, and that is, what if everything is either a blue link where Google really doesn't have much understanding, or a featured snippet where Google's gaining understanding, it's building information, or at least it understands it linguistically, or a knowledge graph? What if this is a progression of blue link, then featured snippet, and then knowledge graph? What if everything on the web starts as a blue link, graduates to a featured snippet, and then only then eventually becomes knowledge graph? Or what if some things get promoted to knowledge graph, but some things aren't important, so they stay in the featured snippet node off of a knowledge graph kind of category? So in this video, we have a query for what is range. And when we start, we get something that looks a little bit like maybe a knowledge graph, maybe a featured snippet. It's a pretty small knowledge graph because it's only got some images and 1 sentence from Wikipedia. So maybe it's knowledge graph, maybe it's featured snippet. Probably knowledge graph because it's got the triple dots where you can get a share link to it. But when we click down, this is interpreting the question as math. How do you find a range? And we have people also ask. Well, what happens when you click on people also ask? It gives you a featured snippet. So perhaps that was a knowledge graph, and the people also ask, which often comes right below knowledge graph, is the sub nodes off of the knowledge graph. And then we get down to related searches at the very bottom, and we have this horizontal carousel, and we have the vertical expanders. Now, the vertical expanders expand to show you more featured snippets, but that carousel of people also search for, that links to more knowledge graph. Now, in this case, we've got disambiguation of knowledge graph entries at the top, videos, which is rare, and then something that, again, looks, in this case, like a featured snippet. So perhaps that link was linking not from one knowledge graph to another, not from one entity to another, but one entity to a related featured snippet. So I think this is an interesting way to conceptualize what we do and what we're thinking about as SEO, where Google wants to go, because that makes sense that Google would want to go in that direction, because then they can control more and more of the experience, and they can lift more and more content to really keep people on Google properties that are monetized for them. And so, yes, you can be mad, but I don't think it's going to do you any good in rankings. But I think if you want to, if you're okay trading off being there versus getting people to your website, I think that you win if you're at least there, because if you're not there, your competitor's there. And this has, been a controversial topic for a year, but my vote, especially for bigger brands, is you want to be there in any way that you can. And if you want to get your website ranking, it means writing content with the right keywords, but optimizing titles with H1s and H2s and H3s on your subtitles. And what we find is that when we add jump links to our H2s and H3s, as long as they're under a good H1, that's a great way to get Fraggles. And having good optimized H1s are a great way to get site links. And of course, you've got to watch this and track it, because most SEO analytics platforms aren't telling you if you get site links, what they are, and they're definitely not telling you if you get fraggles and what they are. The last thing to cover here is video fraggles. Now, this is interesting to me because what happens here is, it's a weird query, best way to eat ostrich, but you can, it's edible. In this, what happens is Google sees the question and it's highlighting not just the video, but what part of the video answers the question. And this tells us things. Number one, it tells us that Google might just be auto-transcribing all of the voice in all of the videos that you submit to YouTube and looking for Q&A. So if you treat the words that you're putting into a video as if you are optimizing text on a page and you do Q&A, maybe that's going to help you rank your videos and get exposure at the top of a search result, because videos do seem to magically float to the top of a lot of search results, especially if they're Q&A, how-to, FAQ. The other thing is that you can add bookmarks into your videos, kind of like jump links, to help Google understand. So again, these aren't necessary, but they are helpful. They do seem to speed up the process of Google finding the suggested clips. So upload all your videos to YouTube. Think about the things that you say as optimized text. Add the bookmarks at the timestamps. And then again, track this, because most of your SEO analytics software is not showing you when you get suggested clips in your videos. And so what we did to help is we created a tool that lets you, number one, test search results for knowledge graph, GMB, or just regular search results from anywhere in the world, but also screen caps them, full-length screen results over time, so that you can go back and see what are the things that have changed that didn't show up in my analytics. What is analytics not telling me? And in this case, for instance, we see that we're tracking a restaurant that temporarily closed because of COVID. And so we want to know, when did that message go live? Because sometimes you submit to GMB and things don't go live immediately. But same still, if we were tracking a knowledge graph by putting the short link into our tool, we would be able to see, when did this image get added? When did this quote get added? When did they start to recognize our blog? When did they start to show this kind of information? When did they switch this information? All stuff that's valuable for your brand, but not really reported anywhere else. Same thing too with just a regular search result. If we wanted to search for pizza from Tokyo and track that, we could do that from right here in Denver, Colorado, or from Soma, where you guys are. You could see that and get the visual representation of what has changed and what hasn't. So I want to protect you guys from being too stuck in your data and missing the larger changes. I want to help you guys see the future and plan for it. And to me, what that means is looking at real search results and not denying the reality that most users are getting sucked into stuff that's not blue links. And that we need to plan for that reality so that we get exposure at all. Just demanding that Google send traffic to blue links is probably not going to work. So with a strategy like that, you can rebuild and you can flourish, but it's just going to be a little bit different. So I want you to be open to SEOing like an amateur, looking at real results and saying, I want to be there, and then figuring out how to do that and not locking yourself down to saying, that's not SEO, I'm not going to do it. And with that, I think you can really grow something great. And yeah, I'm done. If you want to see real results, just try the Mobile Moxie tools. We've given you 30 days free, and the promo code is wine time. Because is it wine time yet?
It is wine.
It's wine time, Cindy.
Absolutely.
That's why we're here.
Good.
Well,
wonderful.
And a great conference.
I know, like, Cindy put in a ton of effort. She's one of those speakers that even beforehand has everything like pre-recorded just in case. But you know what? I like the version with Barkley. So this worked out great.
In the recording that I sent you, there was no Barkley.
No, I like the version with Barkley.
It's real. It's all real.
It's
We're
good.
okay
I
with it.
think that my lawn crew came and showed up. He's just protecting me from the lawn crew.